Now we move on to the major web services. So you really need to rank them in order of their importance to you. The first ones we're going to look at are the majors, the first tier web services. You might think of them as three tiers. So tier 1 is the major global web services, the ones that we all recognize by name and by logo. The second ones are perhaps the grouping that is the 10 most significant to you. So they might not be, they may well be quite obscure services, but if they're very useful to you, then it's something that you need to manage and be active in. And then tier 3 would just be all the others. You can't really ignore tier 3. You still need to kind of deal with it or manage it because of that issue of someone potentially sitting on your name or your book titles. And they can either do it by accident or maliciously. I mean, could easily be both. Could easily be either, sorry. But let's have a look at the 3 or 4 big ones in depth. Google. It's a sort of a no-brainer, really. You have to have a Google account, even if you just have it as a placeholder. But what you do need to understand, though, when you enter into an agreement with Google, is that you get to use all their services for free, but it's only because you become the product. Your data and whatever information you put across their networks becomes their product. That's what the information they sell to advertisers. So it's only free in terms of you're not paying a monthly subscription. It's certainly not free because you're paying with it. It's not entirely free because you are paying with your own personal data. You have to make a decision whether you think that's a worthwhile exchange or not. So the big ones are Gmail, and it's how you set up an account, is just get a Gmail account. And of course, go and grab your name at gmail.com or some variation of it, or even a few variations of it if you really want to be serious about it, because it's a very useful thing to have. You might not always be working at the same company or the same institution or the same, might not always have the same website. So the at something, in our case unimelb.edu.au, might not always be the same. So having your name at gmail.com gives you some sense of that it's going to be around for a little while, and even if you don't, you've still got it there as a backup. You can have multiple accounts. If you do have lots and lots of accounts and you try and interlink them, Google will try and will always ask you for verification because they're just trying to make sure you're not a robot. And then the next thing you do is set up a Google Plus account. So Google Plus is basically their version of Facebook. It looks very similar, but it's the main interface where you can get into all the other tools. You can search from there. You can link over to your YouTube account. All the commenting on the YouTube account is now handled by Google Plus, so you must have those two things linked up if you want to manage the comments. Maps, Google Drive, which is an online storage place, free storage. And then if you're an Android user, obviously the Google Play apps marketplace is linked there as well. You can go one step further and put all your calendar items and all your contacts and all your photos and videos onto Google as well. It's obviously a very broad selection of services, but some people find it very useful. And Blogger is also a YouTube entity as well. So it's worth thinking about going and setting up some blogs with, even if they're just for placeholders, with perhaps the names of your books or your publications, your major ones. That way, if you ever decide to publicize them, you can use that as one of the planks in your platform for how to publicize it. So Facebook and Twitter are, household names now. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because to work with Facebook and Twitter as a sort of a marketing tool to promote yourself, to publicize yourself, is actually a pretty wide-ranging thing, so we're not going to delve into it deeply. But I will make a few points. One is that they're both too big to be ignored. So if you don't go and claim your presence on these platforms, then you're doing it at your own peril. You should really just do it just to make sure no one else can. Facebook is different from Twitter because it's not automatically public facing. It is a very, very big database of interconnected people, so it is searchable, and sometimes people decide to make it publicly searchable so that all their Facebook postings can be found in Google. But essentially it's a gigantic walled garden. Whatever you put in there remains in your network, so to speak, even though you do need to actively manage your settings to make sure that that's the case. Otherwise it defaults to being widely available and shareable. It's predicated on being share the media and the information that's there being shared, especially to marketers. So again, any information that you put there is always used explicitly for them to show you ads, targeted advertising. Twitter is different because it is public facing, but it does also have a DM function, a direct messaging function. So you can have a private version of it, but obviously the great appeal for Twitter is that it can surface interesting material. So being an academic, you potentially have a very big following already, people who've read your books, people who know your work, know your research, ex-students, and having a very large following can mean that you can become a curator of useful material for other people. Like Facebook, it's a highly conversational tool, so if you do want to jump in there and use it effectively, you need to be engaged with it. You need to be very conversational with people, making comments, responding here and there. You can't just kind of say something and then expect that that's broadcast and then that's the magic bullet. That's how it works. There's a lot of backwards and forwards. The other major one worth mentioning at this point is LinkedIn. It's a large professional network tool. It's like the professional version of Facebook. That's probably the easiest way to sum it up. It has all the same functionality as Facebook. You can post photos and links and media. But yet it is very different because it's where your professional contacts are, and your CV can go there, your research profile, collaborations, or whenever you've been at a conference, you might put your you might keep people up to date with where you're going and where you're presenting through LinkedIn. It's also widely known as the place where people get headhunted from. So that's why it's very useful for recruiters, and if it's worth keeping it up to date so that people do know what your current situation is. If it's your intention to move around and be linked up with a lot of people and work with different institutions and centres, then maybe LinkedIn is the kind of tool that you want to actively manage. But it is definitely the professional version of it, so it's worthwhile keeping it separated from your personal or less formal commenting and conversations. So what to know about it? If it wants to suck in all your contacts list, it'll always try to get more and more contacts. Your colleagues or collaborators, your friends and family, of course, anyone that's on your email list. So that could be potentially a very large list of people, particularly if you've got emails going to all your ex-students. And the other thing that it does, it's got what's called a recommendation engine inside it. So it'll constantly ask you to recommend skills and knowledge of your contacts. And of course, if you do this, people are inclined to then recommend your skills and knowledge. And it's a way of strengthening the network, the connections between people inside your network. It's a way of it building in user-generated recommendations.